And now we wait. There we go. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, How to Make a Heritage Award Nomination. My name is Ryan Coons, and I'm the Maryland State the Folklife Specialist of the Maryland State Arts Council. Before we get started with the meat of today's meeting, just a few grounding rules and documents so that everyone's on the same page. Here on the screen, you see an overview of Google Meet, which is the communication platform we're using. The way it's arranged on your screen might look a little different. Google Meet recently updated its platform, and some folks see the new version and some folks see the old version you see here. In any case, the same bells and whistles are available. They just might be in a slightly different part of your screen than you see here. A couple things to note: if you're not actively speaking at any given moment, do please use the microphone button to mute your audio. This will minimize any audio interruptions or feedback. Please also be aware that the chat function is public, so anything anyone types will be visible to everyone. And finally, closed captioning is available there in the bottom, listed here under subtitles. Please be aware this is auto captioning, so occasionally some very interesting things will get spat out by the AI. So please use it with, take it with a grain of salt, shall we say. We like to begin all public meetings of the Maryland State Arts Council with a series of grounding documents so that you, our audience, and constituents get to know us and our institution a little bit better. Following the best practices of accessibility, I will read them aloud. Our equity and justice statement: the arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council, or MSAC, and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination, regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Our vision: MSAC plays an essential role in ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And our mission: MSAC advances the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. We have 5 strategic goals. They are to increase participation, to provide intentional support, to build capacity, to leverage connections, and to bolster Maryland arts. And today's webinar really speaks to these first 3: to increase participation, provide intentional support, and build capacity, in order to achieve the 5th: to bolster Maryland arts. Today and going forward, we invite you to participate using these creative meeting actions. They are: celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements such as I think, or I believe, or I have experienced, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, apply yes and, I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and balance speaking and listening. Today's webinar is part of a series of professional development opportunities offered by MSAC. And I'd like to draw your attention to 2 points here on the screen in front of you. One is Coffee with the Council, which will soon begin again Tuesday mornings. This is a space for updates from MSAC Council members and for constituent and Maryland resident peer-to-peer sharing. And also, please be aware that the 2021 Maryland Regional Arts Summit will be held virtually this year, and that will occur on September 23rd. And information for this and all of our other professional development opportunities can be found on our website, msac.org. Today's webinar is How to Make a Heritage Award Nomination. My name again is Ryan Coons, and I'm the Folklife Specialist at MSAC, and I'm joined today by my wonderful colleague, Chad Buterball, Senior Program Director of MSAC. We're going to go through what the Heritage Award is. From beginning to end, we're going to go over the nuts and bolts of how to actually go through the process of making a nomination, and then speak to some nomination strategies that have become very visible to us as points that could be useful for you, our constituents, making these nominations. Throughout the presentation, you will find a series of photographs featuring current and previous award winners. On the screen here is Chum Nyek of Montgomery County, who is a master traditional Cambodian musician who received the 2016 Heritage Award in the category of person. So without further ado, Heritage Award is an annual award, one of several awards and grants administered by the Maryland State Arts Council. It is given to 3 different awardees each year. One awardee in the category of person or people, a second awardee in the category of place, and a third awardee in the category of tradition. And each of these awardees annually receive a $5,000 unrestricted award. And in this case, what that means is that unlike certain grant programs, especially grant programs as opposed to awards, the funds that applicants or nominees or awardees receive must go towards the things that they applied to do, a project, a concert, operating costs, what have you. Unlike those programs, the Heritage Award features an unrestricted grant, meaning that awardees can use the funds for any and everything they might want to do it for. No restrictions whatsoever. Here, of course, is a photograph of Cultura Planera running a bomba and plena dance and percussion workshop. Cultura Planera and the way they uphold the Puerto Rican diasporic traditions of bomba and plena received the 2019 Heritage Award in the category of tradition. Eligibility for the award is very broad. Anyone, literally anywhere in the world, can nominate, but the people or places or traditions that they nominate need to be geographically located in Maryland. And I want to stop for a moment on this point. Sometimes we receive questions about eligibility writ large for any of our grants, especially within Maryland Traditions program. Folks sometimes are confused, since it's called Maryland Traditions, what that means. And again, it's folks who are resident, traditions that are resident, places that are resident within the state. They could have been here for 5 years, they could have been here for 50 years, they could have been here for 10 centuries. Maryland Traditions funds, for example, American Indian traditions, diasporic traditions from Asia, Europe, Africa, South America, anywhere you can think of. Folks who live here, those are the eligibility requirements, just geographic residency. Awardees can receive the Heritage Award only once, and please note that this is not able to be gifted posthumously. So for example, if somebody is deceased, or if a business is no longer in business, if it's bankrupt, or if a place, if a place has been bulldozed and gentrified and is no longer what it was, I suppose, I'm not quite sure how that would work, then they are not eligible. These are people, places, and traditions that are still living today. Self-nominations are accepted. Please feel invited to nominate yourself or your organization or your place. And there's no limit to the number of nominations that may be made in connection with a single traditional art. I don't know that we've had a situation in which 2 or 3 of the awards in any single year have been to the same broader tradition, but it's not unheard of. Here you see as an example of the wide range of awardees, Stuffed Ham, which was the tradition category winner for the 2018 Heritage Award. And this is a particularly regional culinary tradition from Southern Maryland. A tasty one too, I might add. Here's a broad timeline of how the Heritage Award fits across the MSAC year. Nominations open tomorrow, September 1st each year, and then close annually on October 15th. So during that entire month-and-a-half-long period, nominations are able to be accepted in our online grants management software, Smart Simple. We'll talk more about that in a moment. In addition to the actual nominations, the Heritage Award, like all MSAC programs, relies quite heavily on the work of panelists. Panelists are publicly sourced professionals, specialists, experts, former grantees, former awardees. People self-nominate to become a panelist. This is a paid opportunity. And panelists do the work of adjudicating the grants, and in this case, the awards. Adjudicating them against the rubric rather than against other awardees or nominations or applications, depending on the program. And during October, there's a 2-week-long period during which potential panelists may self-nominate, may self-apply, again, through Smart Simple. We'll talk more about this shortly. Panelists, of course, do the actual review of the nominations in December of each year. And then in January, nominators are notified of their successful or unsuccessful statuses, and we begin processing the funds to go to the awardees. So if you're interested in making a Heritage Award nomination, tomorrow is the start. Perhaps the most important part of the Heritage Award, like any program run by MSAC, is what we call the review criteria. This is the rubric of which the panelists can compare an application, or in this case, again, nomination, to the rubric in order to make an adjudication and score any particular nomination. The Heritage Award happens to have 3 review criteria, and they are the nomination's identification of a form of folk life. Is it a form of folk life, or is it a traditional art? Roughly synonymous. Second is the nominee's connection to the folk life of a particular community. Essentially, in what way or ways does the nominee connect with people of a specific place or a specific tradition or from a specific diaspora or location? How does the nominee connect within community? And third is the nominee's sustained engagement with folk life as a person or place or tradition. And again, the Heritage Award, of course, recognizes and awards connection over time, engagement with traditional arts over time. So how long has that been sustained is part of the criteria. These 3 review criteria map quite easily onto the application, the 3 questions that you'll find in the nomination. Sorry, I keep saying application, kind of a verbal autocorrect, if you will, but in this case, of course, the Heritage Award is all nomination, excuse me. Here on the screen, you'll also see a member of 2 families from Western Maryland who are engaged in a multi-generational practice and tradition of maple sugar making. Again, just to bring home how broad some of the successful nominees and awardees have been, coming from a wide range of culinary, activity, performance, and so on and so forth. Nice breath. I mentioned that the award is gifted in 3 different categories. These categories are person or people, and here you see the 2021 Heritage Award person category winner, Piedmont bluesman and celebrated harmonica player Phil Wiggins of Montgomery County. The second category, as I mentioned, is place, and here you see the 2021 place category winner of the Heritage Award, the historic Denzel Carousel, located in Glen Echo Park, also in Montgomery County. And the third and final category of the award is tradition. And here you see a photograph of 2 Arabbers fixing a cart. Arabbing is the 2021 Heritage Award winner in the category of tradition. And this particular tradition is one in which primarily Black people sell fruits and vegetables out of horse-drawn carriages in primarily Black neighborhoods in Baltimore City, supporting community and maintaining tradition. Now to the nuts and bolts. How to actually make a nomination. Like every program that MSAC administers, you will find on our website, msac.org, a program page for each program, and the Heritage Award is no exception. You see here a screenshot of that web page. And you'll notice 2 blue arrows pointing towards the right side of this web page. Again, on each of our program pages, you'll find this yellow box called Quick Resources. It's here at the top. And within that quick resources box, you'll find probably the single most important resource that we are able to make available to folks who want to nominate or apply for this program. And this is the grants guidelines. It's not the most exciting reading. It's probably very good bedtime reading, especially if you're suffering from insomnia. But it does include all of the nuts and bolts that you need in order to be able to make a nomination, including eligibility details, the rubric, the ways in which panelists will adjudicate any particular nomination, and also includes contact information for myself and my colleagues should you have questions about any particular part of the nomination process or questions about the online grants management software, Smart Simple, which we'll get to in a moment, or other aspects of it. So really, really useful resource, and I recommend that you spend some time reading through it and getting to know it. Will actually save time in the long run. I mentioned several times our grants management software. This is available online. It's called Smart Simple. If you already have registered previously, this just involves, of course, logging in. But if you are new to it, registration is quite easy. You'll see here in the bottom left-hand corner of this screenshot of Smart Simple, 2 red arrows pointing to the register button. And we recommend registering as an independent artist. And if you are already registered as part of an organization, we recommend re-registering as an independent artist in order to facilitate the nomination process for the Heritage Award. Once you have created your profile, and this is a dummy one that I've created here, this is roughly what you'll see. This is kind of the landing page, the home page once you're inside. This is not yet visible because, of course, the nomination period opens tomorrow, but you'll see here 2 red arrows pointing to the funding opportunities. And as grants and awards become available to be applied for or nominated for, this number currently listed at 11 will shift a little. And tomorrow you'll be able to click on that 11, those funding opportunities, and find amongst a list the Heritage Award nomination form. And it's all done can all be completed. It needs to be completed in our online software. We'd like to turn now to nomination strategies, things that will hopefully help you create a stronger nomination. Keep in mind that panelists coming to the process of adjudication for any particular application are almost definitely not specialists in your specific tradition or the tradition that you are nominating or the person you're nominating or the place. So we recommend strongly that you write a nomination as though the panelists know nothing. Think about the way you might present to a classroom of students who have never encountered the material before, kind of a 101 level college course, bare bones, broad generalizations. That will really help, excuse me, that will really help panelists be able to contextualize what it is that you are nominating within its tradition. Excuse me. Chad, is there anything that we should be adding here? Anything that I've missed on this particular point?
I think that we can stop for questions frequently to address anyone's comments or concerns.
Yes, indeed. And also there will be a Q&A session at the end if anyone is still thinking through a question and wishes to wait for that. But if you do have a question, there is a raise hand function. On my screen, it's kind of in the bottom and looks a little bit like this hand icon. Feel free to raise your hand or just pop your question into the chat. We are able to work with both. Second nomination strategy. Oh, I beg your pardon, I nearly forgot. Again, in keeping with just sharing with you the breadth of the awardees, you see here this photograph of the traditional homelands of the Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians in what is now known as Dorchester County on the Eastern Shore, who received the 2020 Heritage Award in the category of place. The second nomination strategy that we recommend is to use the supplemental materials section, which is part of the nomination process. We recommend using it to provide a taste of the nominee rather than an entire meal. Again, keeping with the idea that, or the reality rather, that panelists are coming to this process with specialist and generalist knowledge, but not necessarily specialist knowledge in your specific nominee's area or tradition or community. So providing them a brief taste of it will not overwhelm them and will pique their interest. And here you see, excuse me, celebrated storyteller Mother Mary McCarter Smith. This particular photo, excuse me. Ain't humidity wonderful. This particular photo was part of the 2020 Heritage Award in the category of tradition, which was awarded to the Baltimore City-based Black storytelling tradition. A third nomination strategy that we recommend and that we very much want to make you aware of is to use myself and my colleagues for technical assistance. Technical assistance is a very general phrase we use to define a very broad range of services that we are able to provide that, frankly, we are paid to provide. Our paychecks include this. So please use us as the public resource that we are paid to be. This can include, for example, answering questions or clarifying questions about this particular award or any other program that MSAC administers. It can also involve actively looking at nomination or grant application documents, prose. Of course, we are not able to do line-by-line recommendations, but we are able to look at your drafts and say, perhaps you could include more detail on this, or maybe clarify this, or don't forget to address this particular part of the nomination. So we recommend and invite you to use us as technical assistance resources multiple times, an iterative process, rather than just a single one-time connection. We've noticed that since, of course, we are paid to be the specialists in the grants and the awards that we administer, that folks who connect with us multiple times are able to strengthen their applications and nominations and improve the likelihood that they will receive the award or the grant. And here on the screen, you see Master Appalachian Flatfooter Rock Howland of Frederick County, who received the 2020 Heritage Award in the category of person or people.
We have a question in the chat here. If there's a person who's responsible for continuing a tradition, would you nominate under the category of person or tradition?
That is an excellent question, and you do have both options. I think probably the best thing to say is that we get a lot of nominations in the person category, which of course decreases the likelihood that any single nominee will receive that category's award. So nominating under the tradition category just statistically increases the likelihood that your nomination will receive the award. Just thinking purely in terms of statistics there. Thanks for calling that to my attention, Chad. The fourth nomination strategy that we recommend is to apply to be a panelist. People who have done so tell us that the perspective of kind of the back end side of things, of what panelists are looking for, how panelists are thinking and what they're thinking about as they go through the adjudication process is utterly invaluable to the process of then creating hopefully a successful nomination oneself. Now, of course, if you want to make a nomination this cycle, you are welcome to apply to be a panelist, this cycle. And you would just, of course, be required to recuse yourself and mute your audio and your video during the online virtual public panel meeting. But that's no problem whatsoever. But if you're thinking ahead in the longer perspective, perhaps apply to be a panelist this year and then make a nomination next year. I see a question here. Jill Warzer asks, I know each panel is different, but is it possible to receive recommendations for improving a nomination that was reviewed last year if you're planning to submit a similar nomination this year? Thank you very much for your question, Jill. And the big, bold headline answer is yes. Part of the technical assistance that I and my colleagues offer as part of our jobs is reviewing unsuccessful applications and nominations. And we put together what's called, Chad, correct me on this if I get this wrong, the grant review form? That's not it. What is it, Chad?
A grantee feedback form. Or applicant feedback form.
Thank you. And this is just a sheet that synthesizes the feedback that your application or nomination received from panelists. So this is very much a part of the technical assistance that we are paid to provide. So please connect with me afterwards by email, and my email address will be coming up very shortly.
And that's just one step in the process, Jill. One-on-one conversation is also always on offer for improving nominations.
Very much so. And if I'm honest, it's one of the favorite parts of my and many folks' jobs to be able to connect with you, our residents and our applicants and nominees and grantees and stakeholders. Well, I've said that my contact information was coming up soon, and I spoke more clearly than I thought I was. You can reach me at these phone numbers and email address that you see listed here. Again, my name is Ryan Coons, and I'm the MSAC Folklife Specialist, and I have the honor of directing the Heritage Award Program and also the Folklife Apprenticeship Program, if that's also something you might be interested in pursuing. We will be holding a comparable webinar on the Folklife Apprenticeship later this calendar year. You can find information for that on our Eventbrite, the link for which I will place in the chat in a moment. Here we go. And at that time of that particular webinar, we'll be going over the specifics about the Folklife apprenticeship in much the same way we have today. So keep that in your back pocket as a useful tool and professional development opportunity. So I'd like to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, and while you're thinking through that, introduce you to Curtis Coney Island Famous Wieners of Allegheny County. Again, we've got a lot of food awardees today. I must have been hungry when I put this program together. Curtis Coney Island is a very well-known, locally well-known, and century-old restaurant and community gathering space in Cumberland in Allegheny County, and it's been run for a number of generations by the Giatris family. So what questions do you have, and how may we continue to help and remove obstacles? Pablo, you have raised your hand. Please feel free to unmute.
Hi, and thank you, Ryan and Chad. This is great. I had questions. I applied last year for someone and didn't get it. So this is very informative for me. Is there, actually last year I applied for someone who does capoeira, Afro-Brazilian tradition in Prince George's County. Is there a year of or amount of experience, like let's say they've been practicing in Maryland for 5 or 10 or 15 years, or they've been practicing maybe outside of Maryland, but they've been practicing for a lifetime or 20 years or 5 years, or is there, do those years of experience come into consideration?
Chad, correct me if I misspeak or don't speak everything here. Those years of experience are important, Pablo, and of course the connection of this, for example, this individual that you bring up, a capoeira master, within a particular local context in PG County or elsewhere, should that apply elsewhere. Those are definitely important parts to note in the application. I'm going back to the rubric here. Here we go. That would fall under this third question, the nominee's sustained engagement with Folklife as a person, in this case, person given your example, and might also speak to the connection with a particular community in criteria too. So definitely information to include in the application, excuse me, the nomination there. Chad, did I miss anything?
No, that's the basics. And I would say, Pablo, that experience acquired in other states would be recognized as long as the nominee is located in Maryland at the time of nomination. And also that there is no eligibility cutoff for time depth. There's no official cutoff. But if you look at the rubric, you'll see that those traditions with a longer generational history of practice are probably going to make stronger nominations than those traditions that are 10 or 20 or 30 years old.
Okay,
a good example would be comparing hundreds of years of history of capoeira to Baltimore Club, which is a form of music that we've awarded in the Folklife apprenticeship, but which only has about 30 to 40 years of history located here in Baltimore City.
So TikTok producer doesn't count.
TikTok can be an interesting tool, but TikTok itself would be far weaker as a nominee than I don't know, the typewriter.
we will see 100 years from now. We will know
That's right.
Thank you, Pablo. Cheryl, you have a raised hand. Please feel invited to unmute and ask your question.
Very good. Thank you. In the first criterion, it talks about the current community participating in the form of folklife. And so that term community is there. And then in the second criterion, what is the nominee's connection to the folklife of a particular community? And I get a little confused by the meaning, the implication of the word community. Is this, like in our organization, is this asking about the importance to our own organization and people who have similar heritage or interest, or is it, the fourth grader in a classroom in Dorchester County, for instance? What does it mean by the impact and the description of community, and how is it different in one of those criterion versus the other?
So that is a fantastic question, and you've also hit on, shall we say, an academic conversation that no one has yet to fully answer. What is community? In this instance, our use of the word community is meant to be as broad as possible in order to allow for a very broad breadth of different types of nominations. For example, Southern Maryland ham culinary traditions, indigenous landscapes, dance traditions. Again, we're going for breadth within the choice of language you see here on the screen. To get to your specific question, it really depends what the nominee is. So, for example, if I can go to Pablo's example of a capoeira master, the criterion 1, what is the form of folk life? The form of folk life is either the person, if that particular route is chosen, or it could be capoeira itself as practiced by the person, so a tradition nomination. In some other examples, the form of folk life could be indigenous homelands. It could be, I'm afraid I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but for example, a town founded and maintained by a specific Black community, and why that is meaningful. That's the form of folk life, for example. Moving with these examples into criterion number 2, the connection with a particular community. Again, that's going to look different for each nomination. Going back to Pablo's capoeira example, it could be the ways in which the nominee, if a person is embedded within a specific diasporic Brazilian community in PG County. It could be the way, if it's a tradition nominee, the ways in which that particular community, as defined in the nomination itself, how that particular community maintains the capoeira tradition locally to them. Thinking about ancestral homelands and the Black town that I just hypothesized as an example. With that town example, it could be an instance in which, if we're talking about a place, the ways in which that place has become meaningful or, was founded as a way of being meaningful by the citizens of that town. So the community would be defined as that specific town. If we're talking about ancestral and indigenous homelands, as we've had a number of awards go to different ancestral homelands, that would, I think, more, thinking about that as a place nomination, I would envision that being most easily discussed in ways in which tribal members and community members, the community is defined as the tribe, probably less so than the fourth grader that you mentioned. If it's a tradition nomination, again, going to traditional homelands, are there specific traditions? For example, I'm choosing literally at random a series of hypothetical examples, a particular tradition of, say, ramp hunting on a traditional homeland. That's the tradition. It might be one practiced by the tribal peoples of that particular location. That might be a way of connecting the traditional of the land with the community of tribal peoples. That's something that I would recommend connecting with me on if you have very specific questions as you start a nomination itself. Again, just because our language here is meant to be very broad and apply to a lot of different cases. So when we kind of hone in on a specific case study, I would recommend different routes forward. I hope that was helpful, all of that waffling.
Well, I keep looking for also a place within the process where and if it ever is important to show any documentation of people that have attended one of the events, or
thinking like audience members.
Yes, like audience members
as a way of, that might be something that would fit both as a fact, as a fact mentioned as part of the prose in probably the second criterion here. Possibly also that could be added as an example or by way of demonstrating sustained engagement in criterion number 3. And if you did have such documentation of that, for example, photographs of the audience or photographs, if you're doing demos or live performances that somehow involve audience members or community members, photos of that kind of thing might be a useful thing to include as kind of that taste that I mentioned earlier within the supplemental materials of a nomination. It's kind of a, within the broad, deliberately designed to be flexible structure of the review criteria pros, as you choose a nominee, how you best want to communicate the information you have about them and the data that you have.
Right. Well, and along that note, and I'll stop after this to give other people a chance, but photographs, would that be something interspersed in the pros, or is that, does that go along with, I forget the term you used, there was another little segment of.
Yes,
There
that
you
would
go.
actually go into the supplemental materials, only because the pros sections can only accept text, typing directly
Okay.
in or copy pasting into them. They don't actually, it's a series of text boxes really that allow for text input. And for example, if you wanted to reference a photograph that you would upload as part of the supplemental materials within the pros itself, you could say, see photo 1, see video 1, or file name, so that we can connect that particular part of your pros with the material in the supplemental materials.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your questions. Jill has another question in the chat, and Chad, I'm going to ask for your help with this one because I'm not 100% certain I know the answer. Jill asks, can you nominate someone in 2 categories in the same year?
You cannot, Jill, because there's only one person category. However, you can nominate a person for a particular tradition in the person or people category, and then you can go on to make a separate nomination in the tradition category for broad recognition of the tradition. So if you took Irish folk music, you could take the tradition at large in the tradition category and then identify a particular musician in the person or people category. We don't recommend that anyone make more than one nomination in a single year because panelists are going to pick up on that. And although there's no prohibition in the guidelines that would prevent a particular tradition from being recognized twice in the same year, it hasn't boded well in the past. Panelists tend to want to spread the resources out among multiple traditions. And that is their prerogative based on the way that they're oriented and based on the scope of work that we give them when they're brought on.
Thanks, Chad. Anyone else have other questions? We still have 20 minutes left in this hour-long webinar. We can very easily end early, but we're here to answer the questions that you have. Feel free to raise your hand or pop into the chat, or at this point, just unmute and ask your question. Yes, Cheryl.
If no one else has a question, is it appropriate in the supplemental section to have a screenshot of part of a reference letter from an organization that we may have worked with?
Like a letter of reference on the behalf of the nominee?
Yes.
Oh, very much so.
And is it okay to do a segment of that letter in terms of space?
Oh, I see what you mean. Excerpting the letter. I don't see why not. I mean, again, that really does depend on what the nominee is as to what makes the most sense. But and I appreciate the way you're asking these questions because it's very clear that you're strategizing. And that's probably the single best thing that we can recommend for anyone making a Heritage Award nomination, or indeed any application to any MSAC program, is to really strategize. And Chad just gave the example of being able to nominate the Irish traditional music and an Irish traditional musician within the same cycle. And I think this really speaks to that idea that you have tradition or person or place A, shall we say, and how can you most easily best communicate this nominee through any of the particular categories and the materials that you have. So as you have access to materials that could either become facts within the prose portions of the nomination, or could become photos or videos or audio recordings or letters of reference or what have you, newspaper articles within the supplemental materials section, deploy them as useful to you. And I don't see any reason why excerpting that, as long as it's clear what it is, labeling it clearly, excerpt of letter from so-and-so on behalf of, as a very broad example. Yeah. Chad, anything that I missed there or need to add to?
No, nothing more here.
Thank you.
Thank
Did that answer
you.
your question, Cheryl?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? While you're thinking on that, I'll just pop back to the contact information. So again, please feel invited to be in touch with me if you do end up having a question after this. And if you want technical assistance to review a previous unsuccessful nomination or have questions about your current nomination, that is literally what I am paid for. So thank you for helping me do my job. Hearing silence, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And there we go.